Hello, and welcome back to the UCL Giving Voice Society podcast. Thanks for joining us today on this episode where we dive into the world of stammering. I'm Erica, a second-year speech and language therapy student at UCL. Here with me is Sylphie. Sylphie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, this is Sylphiana. I'm also a second-year speech and language therapy student at UCL.
In this podcast, we will be talking about the lived experience of someone who stammers or a stammerer. And while each person's experience is unique, we are lucky to have Aman Khan here with us. Thank you so much, Aman, for agreeing to be part of our podcast and sharing your experiences with us. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Aman. In my day job, I actually work in the insurance industry as an actuarial analyst, so I basically deal with a lot of data on a daily basis, try and make sense of it. However, I'm also a person with a stammer, and I actually run my own public speaking coaching platform as well. It's called No Holds Barred, where I basically try and make people the most expressive and confident public speakers that they can be.
Thank you. We will just go through a few questions just to find out more. So how has your stammer played a part in shaping who you are growing up?
So that's a really good question. And I feel like it's a really important question for me specifically because if you asked me this question maybe 5-6 years ago, my answer would be drastically different to the answer I'm going to give you now. Because if you asked me 5 years ago, I would only ever think of the immense negative experiences that I've had with stammering, right? So all throughout my entire life, times where people have made fun of it or put me down because of it, or times where I haven't gone out and made connections with people specifically because I was too afraid of stammering, all those experiences would come straight to mind. However, now I would actually talk about the positives as well. So now that I've basically explained that, I'm just going to quickly go through the negatives first and then a bit about the positives because I think it's nice to end that on a better note. With the negatives, as I mentioned, when you are growing up and you obviously go to school and people start to realize that you speak differently to them, as children, they tend to pick out on it. And initially, it doesn't actually start off as a malicious thing at all because obviously they're children, so they can't have that much of a malicious intent. But over time, as you grow up, when people realize that you speak differently to them, they actually start to make fun of it, they start to mock it, they start to put you down because of it. And what that means is that you as an individual, you start to go back into your shell and you basically very much struggle to go out and make connections with people because you withhold from speaking as much as possible. In fact, I'd say that a lot of people who knew me from school wouldn't know that I have a stammer because I wouldn't voice myself if I felt like I was about to stammer. So I was very much a covert stammerer, which is someone that actively strays away from any speaking opportunity because they feel like that they're going to stammer. So I feel like I definitely got a lot of negatives in the sense of I wasn't able to build those connections with people through the early years of my life. However, with positives, and I'm sure that we'll speak about this as well, because of my stammer, I had this absolutely dire need to be the best speaker that I possibly could. And that basically started, I'd say, around the age of 18, where I had a really terrible stammering experience, which basically led me to crying on my bed for 20 minutes because of how debilitating it was. And I realized that a change needed to be made. And my stammer in that sense was a driving force. And to this day is still the very driving force behind everything I do, which is related to public speaking coaching. So yeah.
That's amazing, Aman. When did you first discover that you have a stammer actually?
So I've realized that I've had a stammer ever since I've had the ability to speak. However, it wasn't really a prominent thing in my brain growing up until I believe the decision was made to start sending me to speech therapy. Because when someone makes the decision, like your parents, to send you to speech therapy, then they obviously have to explain the reasoning behind it. And the reasoning is very much that this stammer thing is bad. It needs to be cured. That word cure is used quite often. And I guess at that point is when I really started to realize it at an impactful level. And I would say that was maybe around the year 8, year 9 mark of my life. So maybe I was 13, 14.
I see. Tell us more about what you did in speech therapy back then.
Yeah, sure. So I believe now in the past maybe 10 years or so, speech therapy has changed a lot. But when I started it, it was much more based around the stammer as an impediment, which must be gotten rid of from the person who has it. And so anything that we did was basically based around, in inverted commas, curing the stammer. So my speech therapist, and I have absolutely nothing against the speech therapist at all. She was a lovely person. But I do think that the techniques which the speech therapy at the time made her use were maybe not the best ones for a stammerer like me specifically. So the techniques that we did were essentially techniques where if you felt a stammer was coming in your sentence, you would essentially modify the way you said the word upon which the stammer you anticipated it. So two things which come to mind straight away. One was that you were to basically cushion the word in a breath of air, so basically really softening the word down. And the other one, which I did remember using quite substantially around that time, was something called the slide technique, where the first syllable of the word, you essentially you prolong it, and then you slide into the word through that technique, essentially. So those are two techniques which I remember quite vividly from that time. And I feel like the detrimental thing behind these techniques is that for me, as a person who stammers, and for a lot of stammerers that I've spoken to, our stammer is not caused by, for lack of better words, a physical impediment. It's not that there is something physically impeding us in, our jaw or our throat or anything. It's just caused because we are a person with a stammer. There's so much research behind what could cause a stammer. We don't know what it actually is, but we just have one. And one thing I've noticed with a stammer is when you anticipate it, it tends to show its head a lot more, and you tend to stammer a lot more. So if there's a technique which is specifically based on anticipating a stammer, you will start to anticipate stammers into existence, essentially, which actually makes the stammering much worse in the long term, and the fear of stammering much worse. It's also very exhausting that every time you're trying to speak, you're always trying to spot a stammer in the sentences which you're about to say.
Thank you. That does give us a lot to think about. The profession has definitely evolved over the years, and there is more of a focus on developing person-centered goals, and it is hopeful that as the profession grows as well, we include the views of people who stammer to ensure that the techniques that we bring about are those that are actually helpful, like you say, and to normalize the idea of stammering and what it's like in the media as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned at 18 that you were really motivated to work on your speech as well. What was that like?
So essentially, I remember this very vivid memory of first year uni freshers week, and I went on the SU page, and I remember seeing this post which I would say probably drives terror into the hearts of most people, but especially someone who has a stammer. It said the words public speaking taster workshop. Obviously, and the thing is, right, a lot of my friends at the time were people who don't stammer. And when I explained this to them, that was scary to them. So for me, it was this extra layer of terrifying as well. But because I think I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that I had this moment around that time which left me quite distraught and needing a change, I kind of used that to propel me into that workshop. And I ended up going there, and it was unlike how I had imagined it, because all throughout my life, whenever I stammered, people had made fun of me and put me down. However, in this specific public speaking workshop, in this environment, there was none of that. There was a lot of encouragement, a lot of positivity. That there was this thing that we did, which I actually still do in my own public speaking coaching as well. After someone stops speaking, you always clap, you always encourage. There's this really positive atmosphere. And whilst at the time I was not a good public speaker in any stretch of that word, it was very addictive, and I kept coming back week after week and just doing more speeches, learning how to publicly speak, and basically honing that skill. Yeah.
I actually have a question for you, Aman. I was thinking about having a stammer and going into uni, where it's a whole new experience with new friends or new classmates and also new lecturers. How did you find uni? Did they help you to adapt to this experience anyway? Or did you find that it was scary, or was the new change kind of a good thing for you?
Yeah, sure. So with regard to did the uni help me, I can't comment too much on that because I never really explicitly told the uni that I had a stammer, nor did I reach out for help from the uni. However, with regard to the experience as a person with a stammer going into uni, it was definitely quite terrifying, and I feel like the summer leading up to uni was the worst because you're anticipating the fact that you're going to be meeting new people every day, and with a stammerer, one of the things which you stammer on all the time is your name, because it's one of the few things I like to say that stammerers are walking thesauruses, because we're so good at swapping out words when we think that we're going to stammer on it, and we're just so good at finding synonyms for words, but there is no synonym for your name. That is your name, and that cannot change. So I knew when you meet new people, the first thing is always you tell them your name. And honestly, I remember almost every interaction with a new person, I definitely either stammered or I made it so that I didn't have to say my name to the person, which did make awkward interactions. But it was definitely quite scary. And I definitely obviously got those classic comments that all stammerers are so used to, like, oh, did you forget your name? Can you even speak English? Etc., etc. The laughter, the rolling of eyes, all these things. But it was also nice that I feel like stammerers are also lucky. And this is a way of thinking I've only discovered recently, is if someone makes fun of me in that scenario, I know I don't want to be your friend. You've immediately told me from the get-go that you've explained what your true personality is, and I don't really want to hang out with you at all. So I feel like I was lucky in the sense that I also managed to find the right people because of how they reacted to my stammer, which I think is I'm quite lucky to have that sixth sense essentially as well. Yeah.
Do you feel that most people around you are aware of what it's like for a person who stammers?
I would say people close to me definitely know to quite a substantial extent what it's like to be someone with a stammer. Definitely some more than others. And those are people that I've spoken to much more about my stammer. However, obviously, at the end of the day, just like anything, you don't know what the experience is like unless you've lived through it. And the thing is, I've always said every single person who speaks on earth does stammer at some point. However, a stammerer is someone who's obviously stammers significantly more than most people, because for most people it's the odd stammer that might happen once a day, maybe once a week, but a stammerer is obviously someone who's characterized by it happening quite significantly in their speech. So unless you have that lived experience, you can't understand it fully, but there's definitely people around me which do understand it to quite a substantial extent, because I made it a job of mine to basically explain it to as many people as possible, because I feel like it's important.
Definitely. Yeah, it's very insightful to hear from you as well. What would you like people to know then about stammering, aside from what you've already shared?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the most important things I feel like people need to know is that stammerers aren't doing what they're doing on purpose, because quite often the thing that people say is, oh, did you forget what you were going to say? Or, are you struggling to speak because you can't think of anything? And people sometimes think that you're stupid and dumb as well because you can't think of things on the spot. Quite often with a stammerer, especially if they're, a covert stammerer like me who likes to plan out these conversations sometimes weeks in advance, then they will know exactly what they're going to say because they've thought about it a million times, and leading on from that, I just want people to know just to have patience and just to honestly just wait maybe a couple more seconds. And this is something I've started to think more recently, but if people can't wait a couple of extra seconds, then I feel like we're losing ourselves. We're losing our humanity if we just can't wait a couple of extra seconds for someone to say what they want to say. Because the thing is, if you speed them up, that might just be 2 seconds of your day, but that stammerer will remember that for the rest of their life. I remember speaking interactions, negative ones from years ago. I remember them so vividly. I could essentially say exactly how they went down, what words I said, what words they said, because those words stick with you quite a lot. So I feel like I would like people to know that we honestly just require a little bit of patience more than anything. Yeah.
every single interaction counts. And like you say, you can still remember those interactions many years later. Aside from these conversations you have with people, you mentioned overcoming your fear of public speaking as well. What was that like? And even for me, it's something I have to overcome as well.
Yeah, of course. So with public speaking was an interesting one, because whilst I was overcoming my fear of public speaking, I was also overcoming my fear of stammering simultaneously, and they kind of happened together. And I think we might talk about this later on, but I feel like it's important to bring it in here. But around the first year of uni, I knew that whilst my stammer was still very present, and I knew that it was unlikely that I was gonna, because at the time I was still searching for the supposed cure for it. I wanted to just stop having that fear and stress that I would have on a daily basis with interactions. So then I went online and I tried to find if there was anyone who was offering some sort of solution, not necessarily a cure, but some sort of solution to that fear that stammerers get. And I came across this guy called Chase Gillis, and this was many years ago, and I don't know what he's doing now. I don't think he even does anything remotely related to speech coaching anymore. The last time I spoke to him was at least 4 years ago, I'd say. But at the time, Chase was basically, he characterized himself as a speech coach, not a speech therapist, because as he put it, the aim was not to overcome the stammer, but it was instead to overcome the fear of stammering so that you can live your life without the fear, regardless of whether you stammer or not. So when I spoke to Chase, he basically explained this to me. And obviously this was a new concept for me, because throughout my life, everyone who knew me had talked about essentially getting over the stammer and getting rid of it from the way I speak. However, this guy was telling me that he could get me over the fear of stammering. And I thought, okay, I can give this a go. And one of the first activities and the most important activities, which I did for months with Chase, was something actually which I found was counterintuitive at first. But he made me, both in person and on the phone, go up to people or call people and have 1 minute conversations where I stammer on purpose on every single word I'm saying. Which obviously when he explained this to me, this didn't make sense. It was counterintuitive, because throughout my whole life, I had been trying very hard not to stammer at all. So someone telling me that you have to go out into the world and stammer on every single word, it was very new to me. And I'll be honest with you, the first 20, 30 interactions were very, very anxiety provoking. They were very stressful. In fact, I remember after them, I was basically drenched in sweat, because as you can imagine, I am a stammerer. I stammer to this day. However, I'm not someone who stammers on every single word that they speak. And I'm already, at this point in time, fearful of people's judgment. So you can imagine the sorts of judgment you would get if you stammer on every single word that you're saying. He'd make me go into busy shops, call up busy takeaways at prime times, ask them for items on their menu, stammer on every single word on purpose. But then something really interesting happened, I'd say about a third of the way. And I think in total, I did somewhere around 60 to 100 interactions in total over that summer. I don't have an exact number off the top of my head, but it was definitely around that number. I'd say around a third of the way in, something happened where basically I started to feel people's judgments less. Yet the people's interactions with me didn't change. So people were just as horrible or nasty, or in some cases very nice as well. The way people reacted to me stammering on every single word did not change. However, my interpretation of their judgment changed dramatically. And Chase then explained to me the whole purpose of this exercise was to essentially desensitize your brain to the judgment that you feel from stammering. And I say about half of the way through, this started to seep into the rest of my life. So I realized I was actively going out of my way to make conversations with people. I would start complimenting people just out of the blue. I'd actually, I would start the conversation rather than being dragged into it. And that was a very new personality style for me, because I'd always either strayed away from conversations, or if I was forced into one, that I would begrudgingly have one. And then by the time we were done, I reached this state with my stammer where whilst I was still somewhat fearful of it, that fear had diminished dramatically. And even though it was not the goal when we started, the amount of times I stammered on a daily basis, that also decreased dramatically, because since the fear went down, the anticipation of a stammer went down, because the fear wasn't as controlling in your brain, because you anticipated it less, you were starting to stammer less. And to this day, I still have that fear. However, I can definitely say it's diminished dramatically, and it's definitely allowed me to have better conversations. And public speaking was essentially another form of challenging myself in this way. I remember speaking to Chase about this, and he was like, you should definitely go for public speaking. It would be a good challenge for you. So then I went for public speaking, and it was an extension of essentially pushing yourself and allowing yourself to be judged by others, so that your brain can get desensitized to it, essentially.
Yeah, actually, for this whole conversation, one word that really came up a lot was fear and anxiety. And I think that's a common theme for a lot of people who stammer, that it is not the impairment itself, where I'm thinking about the impairment model, where it's not the impairment itself that causes all these issues. It's the thinking about the social model, the environment, how other people see you, how is the context shaped around you. And I'm just wondering if we can talk about the positive versus the negative conversations that you had when you were pushing yourself to stammer for every word. Can you describe the positive interactions and what other people around you did that made it positive for you?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question, actually, because with stammerers, we always focus on the negatives, because they feed into the fear more, and the fear in your brain is always much more significant. With the positive interaction that I've had, essentially, it's when I've ever said to someone, I don't do this anymore because I don't feel like I owe people an explanation anymore. But back then, when I was terrified and the world scared me of speaking, I would say, I'm so sorry, I have a stammer. Can you please bear with me? And people would be really nice and be like, don't worry about it at all. Take as much time as you need. You don't need to rush. You don't need to stress. So something along those lines, where they understand that you're struggling, and they've made it evidently clear to you that they're going to be patient. And I feel like that honestly will make a stammerer's day more than anything. And they'll definitely remember those scenarios, and they'll remember those people as well very, very well. So yeah, I say those were some of the positive ones, where they are actively telling you that they're more than happy to be patient. Yeah.
So any situations where they're rushing you, you feel like, oh, they don't really want to listen to me, they just want to move on. So these stressful interactions are definitely the ones that are negative.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
Do you think that there's a core need for people to be more aware of people who stammer, as opposed to just you having to adapt to others?
Yeah, absolutely. I do definitely think that's the case. And I feel like stammering is quite a unique impediment, in the sense that it's not visible to people. It's only realized when you open your mouth to speak. And because in wider society, we still very much do make fun of speech disfluencies. I mean, you look at TV shows, movies, how do they show that someone's fearful? How do they show that someone, for lack of words, sometimes they'll show stupidity through someone stammering. They'll be like, oh, they'll create a stupid character and they'll give them a stammer, which I feel like is honestly just horrible. And I feel like until wider society starts treating stammering as a real impediment which people genuinely struggle with, I feel like until then, stammerers are going to have a really hard time in day-to-day life, because the speaking environment of this really fast-paced, rushed world is not made for someone with a speech impediment, because everything is rushed. I mean, you look at the city that we're in right now, no one will wait for you on any stretch of the imagination, in anything, right? So I feel like it's very important that people know about stammering, because some people also think that that stammering is something which, if you try really hard, you won't do it. You know, like if you just slow down, if you take a breath, you won't do it, right? Because for people, stammering is the equivalent of tripping over yourself when you're walking, right? And if you're careful, then you won't do that. Whereas a stammer catches you, and it can be for absolutely no reason. So I feel like it's definitely very important for people to know about stammering more extensively than they do now.
Is there one misconception or one stereotype where you want to tell the audience of this podcast this is wrong, or anything that you want to educate others on?
Yeah, sure. I'd say more than anything, it's very important for people to know that we haven't forgotten what we're going to say, and we know exactly what we're going to say if you just give us a chance to say it. So some people might butt in, and the thing is, right, some people do butt in your speech, and it's not because they're being malicious in any way at all. It's just who they are, right? However, I would just urge people that if someone is taking a moment to say what they want to say, just stand there or sit there and listen attentively and just wait for them to finish, because it will make their day so much. However, if you ruin it by either butting in or making a comment like, oh, did you forget what you're going to say, or rolling your eyes, they'll probably think about that for the rest of the day, and they'll go to bed thinking about that very conversation. Yeah.
Aman, I know that you have a public speaking platform that now you're running. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So when I was at uni, I decided to reach as high as I possibly could, and I became president of my university's public speaking society, where I basically taught people how to publicly speak on a weekly basis. I would lead workshops on things like body language, vocal variety, confidence, and these were to large groups of between 80 to 100 people. And on top of this, I would also lead weekly smaller group sessions of between 5 to 6 people as well, where, again, I teach them how to be better public speakers, more effective communicators, but obviously more personalized because it's a smaller group. When I left uni after doing this for 2 years, and I started my day job, I realized that passion of public speaking never left me. And I feel like, for me, especially because my stammer is such a core part of my life, I feel like I must always be involved in something related to empowering people to be better speakers in some way or another. So I decided to explore if there was any public speaking in London. I don't know if you guys have heard of Toastmasters at all. Yes. So Toastmasters is this public speaking club. They have clubs all over the world, and there's like 20, 30 clubs in London. I went to Toastmasters, and they have a very rich history. They do a lot of public speaking training. However, it wasn't for me. I felt like Toastmasters was too structured, and they were basically trying to fit you into a box of a public speaker, and they were trying to make you essentially tick certain categories, and if you didn't fit those categories, then you weren't a good speaker. Now, that was my experience with Toastmasters. Some people may have different experiences, and that's completely fair enough, but my experience was that it was about making you a more corporate public speaker more than anything, whereas I had been used to making people just the most expressive public speaker that they can be in their style. So I said, okay, if there isn't one, then I'll just make one. So I started No Holds Barred. And I should add in, actually, I started taking private clients to coach in public speaking back at uni in my final year. However, that was very brief, only for maybe, I'd say, a month and a half, because then exams came round. So when I started No Holds Barred, I actually reached out to some previous people that I had coached, and I said, would you be willing to come on and join this group? So in No Holds Barred, we do very normal things that you'll see in other public speaking coaching platforms, like you have one-to-one tuition and group tuition. However, I've got something else which I do, which is where essentially we have a group of public speakers. We have meetings twice a month. At the moment, they are online. However, there are plans to make one of the meetings in person in London per month, where essentially we all push each other to improve our public speaking skills, where I lead it. I run over certain techniques we can use to become better public speakers. We do activities, there's prepared speeches, and each activity I try and make it as unique, as enjoyable, and in some cases as comedic as possible to make sure everyone has a good time, but they also learn as much as possible. And more than anything, I feel like what separates No Holds Barred compared to a lot of other public speaking coaching platforms is we focus on improvisational speaking more than anything, because I feel like that's the core of speaking. In fact, that's what we're doing now actually as well. And I feel like if you can become a good improvisational speaker, every other aspect of public speaking and any other aspect of verbal communication will come naturally. But I feel like that's the core skill. And I'll do really interesting activities on No Holds Barred to make people better public speakers. Like, for example, I'd say, guys, I want you to come up with a speech about an object that's to the left of you in 30 seconds, and I want you to grab it and literally give me a speech right now. And they'd have to obviously think on their feet, make a speech. And occasionally what I do is, and they hate me for this, but they also learn the most, is they'll get an object, they'll think really hard about a speech, and then I'd say, oh, actually, I'm going to just swap out this object for this. So they literally have to make it up on the spot.
Oh my God.
And and the point of that activity is to simulate that terrifying experience that we've all been through. When you're on a stage, you're speaking, and suddenly mind blank, you can't think of anything, right? It's to train your brain to get used to that scenario more than anything in a safe environment where, you're just learning and it's not an actual public speech. So yeah, that's No Holds Barred.
Yeah, it almost sounds like it's to have a very supportive environment,
Exactly.
a very facilitative environment for even people who don't stammer, because I'm sure a lot of people who do not stammer also have a fear for public speaking. And we all have that fear of, let's say, doing a presentation in front of a lecturer who's mocking you and looking for mistakes. That fear, that anxiety that is constantly wearing you out. I think a lot of us will be able to imagine that.
Exactly. Just for the benefit of our audience who might not know, is this platform only for those who stammer or for anybody who wants to?
So this platform is for absolutely anyone. I talk about stammering a lot when people initially join the platform. So when the way to join it essentially is, so you have a free consultation call, which I offer to people, where I do an assessment of their speaking skills, their public speaking skills, and what they can do to improve. And if they then choose, they can either just take the tips and tricks that I give them for free after that call and just leave, or if they want and they feel like they would want to join the group, then they can come onto the group and basically join that and be part of that group. And it's for absolutely anyone who wants to be a more expressive public speaker, who wants to hone that skill. The only people that I would say it's not for is because I'm trying to be very careful to make sure that the group is as supportive as possible, as least judgmental as possible. Occasionally, I've noticed back at uni, sometimes people who come to improve their public speaking skills are people which just like to listen to the sound of their own voice, and no one else has given them the time of day because they have the most horrendous opinions and very controversial takes. So I just trying to be careful that no one like that joins, which is why I have that consultation call first. But if it's just someone who genuinely wants to improve their public speaking skills in a supportive environment, it's open to absolutely everyone. Yeah.
I actually have a very random question. I was thinking about facilitative environment versus those who have horrendous opinions. Looking back to your kind of high school or uni life, have you had any teachers, or it may not be teachers, it may be one of your peers, who have, what is the right word for it? Who have a very negative attitude or very judgmental attitude towards you with a stammer? And what are those situations like, and how did they kind of add onto that fear? And how can we change that to make it a more facilitative environment?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say for me, I was a unique case in that as a covert stammerer, my teachers wouldn't explicitly know that I had a stammer. And because I would try very hard not to speak if I felt like a stammer was actually coming up. So I'd stay away from that. So explicitly, no teachers actually had negative opinions of me as a stammerer or my stammering. However, I do very much remember, and this is a bit indirect, but in the final year of my school, we had a public speaking competition where you had a first initial round in front of some judges who were speakers, and you had a second round in front of a large audience of 100 people. And I didn't make it past the first round. No one told me why. However, someone else in my year who does not have a stammer, he's not a stammerer, he said that the teacher didn't let him through because he stammered on a word. So I'm going to assume that maybe that has something to play with that. I don't know, because I was never told why I didn't make it through. But if that teacher could not let someone through who doesn't have a stammer because they stammered on a word, I feel like teachers definitely need to be taught more about stammering in that sense. I do believe in the past many years this has changed. I don't feel like all teachers have this opinion now. I feel like the dynamic is definitely shifting towards facilitating a more supportive environment for stammerers, but that was definitely an experience I remember from back in school. Yeah.
Now, with the experience and the knowledge and the confidence that you have as you right now, is there anything that you want to tell yourself back when you were 15, 13 and you were in high school? Would you have changed anything?
In terms of changing anything, I know back then I was quite a timid kid in many, many ways. And whilst it's easy to say that, okay, I could have gone back and made more interactions with people, had more conversations just by engaging in conversations, I feel like I'm doing that now, and I'm definitely making up for it. I mean, a lot of people say to me that people who don't have a stammer wouldn't want to be the president of a public speaking club, let alone someone with a stammer would want to be a public. So I feel like I've almost overcompensated for those experiences. One thing I would say, though, is I would want to make myself go back and call those people out, whoever made fun of it. And that's quite a scary thing to do, but just to, basically say to them, what you're saying is rude, it's mean, it's demeaning, and you shouldn't say things like that because you'll have a lasting impact on someone. I still remember certain, like, those, I think, especially with, I've noticed with boys and men, when you're in a group of them, they can have quite a hostile environment, and there's a lot of quick-witted back and forth dialogue and discussion going on. And as a stammerer, I remember many times where it's kind of your turn to say something, everyone goes quiet and you stammer, and then just everyone in unison just laughs, right? So I feel like a lot of those times I wish I could have just gone back and told them to just shut up, essentially, because they weren't good experiences at all. Yeah,
I think for anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you are a stammerer yourself, what is the message that we want to tell them? That you're not alone in this, and that others can support you, and that adults around you should be supporting you as well. That's very important. You shouldn't be the only one fighting against all of these judgments and all these stereotypes that are acting against you.
Yeah. And if anything, this is such a big part of your identity.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and I'm sure it's the same for everyone else, and everyone who has their own unique stammers, their own unique perspectives and lived experiences as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So I think this is about time to wrap up the whole discussion. And thank you so much, Aman, for guesting in our podcast. Thank you so much. It was a very interesting discussion as well. Is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners? Any final message?
I think a really important thing to say is, regardless of whether you have a stammer or you don't, or you're just someone who's afraid of going out, making conversations, you're afraid of public speaking, all these things, I just want to remind everyone that you all have a voice. It doesn't matter how your voice comes out. It doesn't matter how you communicate. You can have a voice without a voice as well. And I feel like it's important to let that voice be as loud as possible. And And just to say, if there's any stammerers at all who want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to have a discussion and talk about my experiences with stammering. If anyone needs any help with any sort of public speaking coaching, with whether that's to do with stammering or not, you can reach out to me at amankhanspeaking@gmail.com, and I can help anyone who needs it, essentially. Yeah, so make sure to have your voices heard as loud as possible. Yeah.
Exactly. Very well said, Aman. Thank you again for joining us today.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was our episode with Aman. If you're interested in knowing more about Aman's experiences and his public speaking platform, do reach out to his email address, amankhanspeaking@gmail.com. If you enjoyed listening to us, do check out our other episodes available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Happy listening!